On the 26th of June 2026 at Tankfest in Bovington, something appeared that wasn't on the program. No announcement, no fanfare. The Challenger 3, Britain's next-generation main battle tank, simply rolled out and parked itself alongside its two ancestors, the Challenger 1 and the Challenger 2. 3 generations of British Army side by side, spanning nearly half a century of engineering. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. Across all 3 of those tanks, across 4 decades of production, hundreds of vehicles and 2 major wars, the total number of foreign countries that have ever placed an order is 1. One country, Oman, 38 tanks. The last of them was delivered a quarter of a century ago. Now compare that to the tank parked in the metaphorical field next door. The German Leopard 2 has been sold to 19 countries. The American Abrams has been exported to 9. Even the French Leclerc, a tank France itself barely bought, found export customers. South Korea's K2 is winning contracts across Europe as we speak, including a 1,000-tank deal with Poland that we covered in our video on Warsaw's military buildup. The Challenger 2 has one of the best protected hulls ever built. Its Chobham-derived armor is so sensitive that its composition remains classified to this day. It holds a combat record that no other Western tank can match. Not a single crew member ever killed by enemy fire in the entire operational history of the type. In Ukraine right now, crews describe it with genuine reverence. As we showed in our video on Ukraine's Challenger tank strategy, one commander with the 82nd Air Assault Brigade compared it to a sniper rifle. So the puzzle writes itself. If this tank protects its crew better than almost anything on Earth and shoots with the precision of a marksman's rifle, why did the entire world look at it, shrug, and buy German? The answer isn't the armor. It isn't the engine, although the engine didn't help. It isn't the price. It comes down to one detail. A decision made in a British design office decades ago about the inside of a gun barrel and about the shape of the ammunition that goes into it. A decision that quietly poisoned every export campaign Britain ever ran, killed the cheap upgrade that could have saved the fleet, and is still, in 2026, dictating the fate of the Challenger 3. This is the story of how a few millimeters of spiral groove cost Britain the global tank market. Every modern Western main battle tank, the Abrams, the Leopard 2, the Leclerc, the K2, fires its rounds from a smooth-bore gun. The inside of the barrel is exactly what the name suggests, smooth. The rounds are stabilized in flight by fins, like a dart. The Challenger 2 is the exception. Its L30A1 gun is rifled. Helical grooves are machined along the inside of the barrel, and they force the shell to spin as it leaves the muzzle, the same principle as a rifle bullet. Why would Britain deliberately go against the entire alliance? One word, HESH, high explosive squash head. A uniquely British round containing a massive plastic explosive that splats against the target surface, and spin from the rifling helps the explosive pancake spread across a wider area before it detonates. The shockwave travels through the armor and shatters the interface, spalling lethal fragments into the crew compartment. Against bunkers, buildings, and lighter vehicles, HESH is devastating, and it reaches out miles further than a conventional armor-piercing dart. For the kind of wars Britain expected to fight, it was a genuinely rational choice. But the rifling was only the visible half of the decision. The half that actually mattered was inside the turret. British tank ammunition is not one piece, it's split. The projectile goes into the breech first, then a separate bag charge of propellant behind it. 2 components loaded separately and stored separately, and that changed the tank's entire DNA. Because the designers of the Challenger 2 built its ammunition stowage around those short, separate components. Charges tucked low in the hull, below the turret ring, in armored, water-jacketed bins. It's part of why the tank's safety record is so extraordinary. Every other NATO tank fires single-piece ammunition, one long, fixed-round projectile and propellant in a single case, standardized at 120 by 570 millimeters. The Leopard fires it, the Abrams fires it, the Leclerc and the K2 fire it. Germany, the United States, France, Israel, and South Korea all manufacture it, continuously in enormous quantities, in competing factories that drive prices down and innovation up. And the Challenger 2 cannot chamber a single one of those rounds. Only Great Britain has ever made ammunition for the L-30, which means every country that bought a Challenger wasn't buying a tank. It was marrying a supply chain with exactly one supplier on one island feeding one small fleet. Let that idea settle, because it's the entire story. Nations don't buy tanks. They buy into ammunition ecosystems, and Britain was selling a tank that lived in an ecosystem of one. You can watch this one detail kill the Challenger sales campaigns in real time, country by country. Start with Greece, 1998. The Hellenic Army ran one of the most consequential tank competitions of the era, testing the Leopard 2A5, the M1A2 Abrams, the French Leclerc, Russian and Ukrainian entries, and the Challenger 2E, the dedicated export variant. The Greek evaluators published their scores. The Leopard 2A5 came top at 78.65%. The Abrams scored 72.21, the Leclerc 72.03. The Challenger 2E finished last among the Western countries at 69.19%. There were mitigating circumstances. The trial tank was reportedly supplied with old Gulf War-era charges that fouled the barrel and dragged down the gunnery results. But step back and ask what a procurement officer in Athens actually saw. A tank whose ammunition came from a single closing production line, firing rounds nobody else in NATO could share, resupply, or cross-load in a coalition war. Greece bought the Leopard. The Challenger 2E was trialed extensively in Saudi Arabia and Qatar as well. Both countries had money. Both were shopping. Neither signed. The Gulf competitions of the 1990s and 2000s went again and again to the Abrams and the Leclerc. The one sale Britain did close is the exception that proves the rule. Oman ordered 18 Challenger 2s in 1993 and 20 more in 1997. 38 tanks, roughly £240 million across both contracts, delivered by 2001. Oman was a legacy customer with deep historical ties to British defense, a small fleet requirement, and no expectation of fighting inside a NATO coalition where ammunition commonality decides logistics. For Oman, the detail didn't bite. For everyone else, it did. And here's the twist buried in the export story. The Challenger 2E was actually a better tank than the one the British Army drove. Vickers fitted it with a 1,500 horsepower MTU Euro power pack, fixing the chronic underpowered engine problem, and gave it superior French optics. The export team knew the tank's weaknesses and engineered most of them out. Most of them. Because the one thing they never changed was the gun. The turret wouldn't allow it, and that brings us to the moment Britain tried to fix the detail and discovered it couldn't. By the mid-2000s, the Ministry of Defense understood exactly what the rifled gun was costing. UK production lines for rifled 120mm ammunition had already closed. Existing stocks were finite, a countdown clock ticking on every round fired in training. So in 2004, Britain launched the Challenger Lethality Improvement Program, and in January 2006, engineers took a Challenger 2, pulled out the L30, and fitted the German Rheinmetall L55 smoothbore in its place. Mechanically, it worked. The gun was the same length. It slotted into the existing cradle, took the thermal sleeve, the bore evacuator, the muzzle reference system. Early trials even suggested the German tungsten DM53 round outperformed Britain's own depleted uranium Charm 3. On paper, the Challenger's biggest export liability had just been solved with a barrel swap. Then, somebody tried to load the ammunition. Remember the tank's DNA. Every stowage bin, every rack, every armored charge container in the Challenger 2 was shaped around short, split, two-piece rounds. NATO's single-piece rounds are long, 120 by 570 millimeters of fixed cartridge, and they simply would not fit the spaces the turret and hull provided. Engineers studied rearranging the internal stowage, moving racks, reshaping bins. The best they could achieve? 6 rounds. 6. A main battle tank that carries around 50 rifled rounds could store 6 smoothbore ones. Not enough for a single engagement, let alone a battle. The only real fix was a completely new turret, and a new turret meant, in effect, a new tank, at a price the post-Iraq defense budget would never wear. In 2014, the program was quietly dropped. And this is the moment the trap fully closed. The detail was never just the gun. The gun would be swapped in an afternoon. The detail was that the entire tank had been architected around the gun's ammunition, and you cannot retrofit architecture. Britain now owned a fleet of superbly armored tanks that couldn't fire NATO ammunition, couldn't be affordably converted, and whose own bespoke ammunition was no longer being manufactured anywhere on the planet. Every year that passed, the stockpile shrank. And then, in 2023, 14 of those tanks went to war. Ukraine's Challenger 2s have delivered one of the strangest verdicts in modern armored warfare, because the war has proven both sides of the argument simultaneously. On one side, the crews adore the gun. As we covered in our video on Ukraine's Challenger tank strategy, the 82nd Air Assault Brigade evolved an entirely new doctrine around the L-30's accuracy, parking the tanks under tree lines miles behind the contact line and using them as high-precision mobile artillery, with FPV drones spotting and correcting each shot. The rifled barrel's sniper-like precision and Hesch's extended reach against fortifications made the Challenger ideal for exactly this role. The much-mocked British gun found its perfect war. On the other side, the same war is executing a slow death sentence on that gun, and everyone involved knows it. The rifled barrel wears out after roughly 500 rounds, against around 1,500 for the smoothbore on an Abrams or Leopard. Every replacement barrel must come from a shrinking pool of donors, stripped from Britain's retired hulls, because no factory has made an L-30 in decades. Every Hesch and Charm 3-round Ukraine fires is a round that will never be replaced, drawn down from stocks whose production lines went cold 20 years ago. The UK has extended its support contract with Babcock into 2026 to keep the fleet running, training Ukrainian crews to do their own battlefield repairs and managing what spares remain. But you can't contract your way around a closed factory. Think about what that means. Of all the Western tanks fighting in Ukraine, the Challenger 2 is the only one whose ammunition cannot be manufactured anymore. Leopard crews draw from a live, multinational production base. Abrams crews draw from American lines running a wartime tempo. Challenger crews draw from a warehouse, and warehouses only empty. The war handed Britain the ultimate marketing footage: a tank surviving hits that would kill anything else, shooting with legendary accuracy, and simultaneously demonstrated in front of every defense ministry on Earth precisely why nobody ever bought it. Exquisite performance attached to an orphan supply chain is not a product. It's a museum piece that happens to still be fighting. Britain's answer to all of this is the Challenger 3, which is where the one detail presents its final build. Strip away the branding, and the Challenger 3 program is best understood as the invoice for that original ammunition decision, paid 60 years late with compound interest. Because Britain couldn't simply re-gun its tanks back in 2006, the only path to NATO standard firepower was the thing Clip proved unaffordable: a completely new turret. That is why the Challenger 3 actually is 148 existing Challenger 2 hulls fitted with the new digital turret built around the Rheinmetall L55A1 smoothbore, finally able to fire standard NATO rounds and the enhanced kinetic energy ammunition Britain is now co-developing with Germany. The contract signed in 2021 was worth £800 million. The program's declared whole-life cost has since climbed toward £2 billion. And 2026 has shown just how heavy that bill is. In January, the Challenger 3 completed its first crewed live firing, genuinely historic, the first British-fired shot from a newly developed main battle tank in over 30 years. Battlefield mission trials followed through the spring, but in December 2025, Parliament was told that only 8 hulls had been allocated to the program, with series manufacturing not yet started. Then, in June 2026, the Telegraph revealed that suppliers had been told to pause work over a turret gearbox not strong enough for the vehicle's weight and armor, with industry insiders warning of delays of up to 2 years against an in-service date already pushed from 2025 to 2027. There's a deeper problem still, because Challenger 3 is a conversion, not a new build. Britain can only make as many as it has healthy donor hulls. And of the 285 Challenger 2s nominally in service, many are reported to be unserviceable or cannibalized for parts. The Royal United Services Institute reckons a credible NATO armored division needs somewhere between 170 and 300 tanks. Britain is building 148 if the hulls hold out. Which brings us, one last time, to exports. In early 2026, ministers were asked directly whether anyone might finally buy a Challenger. The answers on the parliamentary record claimed significant progress. But watch the wording, because it shifted between January and February. The first answer spoke of exporting Challenger 3 and its capabilities. The second spoke only of exporting Challenger 3 capabilities. Read that carefully. A country that converts its own second-hand hulls has no complete tanks to sell. What Britain can realistically offer the world is the turret, the smoothbore gun, the digital architecture, the sighting systems, mounted on somebody else's hull. After 40 years, the United Kingdom may finally have built an exportable tank, except it's no longer, strictly speaking, a tank. So return to that field at Bovington. 3 Challengers in a line. On the left, a Cold War veteran. In the center, the best protected tank of its generation, beloved by its crews, feared by its enemies, and bought by almost no one because of a spiral groove and a split round. And on the right, its successor, a tank that can finally fire the same ammunition as every ally it has, arriving 30 years after that would have changed everything. The Challenger 3 fired its first NATO standard round in January 2026. Somewhere in a bunker in Britain, the last of the rifled rounds are still stacked on their pallets, waiting to be spent in Ukraine. When they're gone, no one will ever make another.